on. Hello, 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 hello. How about you? How everyone doing? This is
You have to stand backwards. I can't see the top of your head.
All right, how are we looking?
It's great.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. I'm Brent with the CANIS Foundation, also owner of CANIS Behavior and Training. This is a huge, huge event, our very, very first one of the year. I want to thank you guys for joining us, for helping us. We're helping you guys to help you guys with your dogs, your puppies, but also helping support us and just participating in this fundraiser. Okay. Now, those of you guys who know who we are, my name is Brent. I've been a dog trainer after the last 12 years. And one of my biggest passions, and one of the biggest reasons why I became a dog trainer in the first place is to help homeless animals get them a home. I started off at the shelter, then I worked my way into a training facility. I've been training dogs for many, many years. I've partnered with many, many rescue organizations. And this today, our CANIS Foundation, is our way of coming up with a way to solve a couple of problems. Okay? In the United States, there's 1.5 million homeless animals that die in the United States. I would say 650,000 of those animals are actually dogs. Okay? And some of the statistics that we are researching is that up to 75% of dogs end up in the shelter due to some type of behavioral problem, some type of bad management system, where they're not out, they're escaped, perhaps the dogs can't socialize properly when they're younger, so they have behavioral problems with people or dogs or other animals. And then what we start seeing also is, unfortunately, due to lack of education, we start seeing that owners don't necessarily have the knowledge available to them to be able to develop a proper relationship. Unfortunately, people get that sometimes fall out of that because the schematic of how to own a dog when they're younger does not work for the schematic that they need. Okay, so
the audio sounds very muffled according to someone watching.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Hello? Is this the audio? Yeah.
It also sounds very far away.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Is this audio better? Hello, hello? Hello, hello? Is this audio better? Can someone comment on this?
I got a definitely, but I'm not sure if it sounds muffled or because it sounds better.
Okay. If it sounds better, let me see it. Let me just make sure. I'm using my wireless mic. Sometimes it does have a little bit of noise. If I need to talk closer to the camera, I totally will.
I hear it still sounds the same.
It still sounds.
All right, I'm going to put the camera closer to you.
How is this? Still sounds the same.
Still muffled.
Oh my God. Not one thing is another, right?
I hear the person talking, me, sounds clear. You sound muffled.
One second, guys. Sorry. All right. Perhaps computer. Okay. How's this? Is this better for you guys? Go ahead and just turn and face this way.
Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully this is better. Let's get us here. Anyways,
that's better.
I think this is not working, right? This doesn't matter, right? Hello, hello.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, guys. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and scrap this microphone pack because I guess it wasn't working. You know? We'll figure all this out at some point.
Thank you for your help.
Yeah, thank you so much for your help, David. All right. Can I have a chair? Actually, I have a chair. Let me just get this closer to you. All right. So a a lot of animals are dying in the shelter, and the biggest reason that they're dying is simply because they're either mismanaged, or they're not listening to their dog owners, which ultimately leads to a disconnect in the relationship. Sometimes, we don't socialize our dogs. Right? I remember when I was a kid, I had 5 dogs, and all of these dogs lived outside. Right? And I'm a bit of a ranch dog. I grew up on an acre of land growing up as a kid, and these dogs, they were good dogs to the family. So we had a dog that would definitely bite the strangers. We had a dog who liked to kill the neighbor's chickens. We had a dog who constantly was chewing at sticks and digging holes and trying to escape out of the properties. I mean, there's a lot of things that we see with dogs that lead to them becoming homeless or potentially poverty. Right? And one of the things I gained in my experience was the more I worked with rescue organizations. As dog trainers, we are kind of the middle point between breeders and rescue organizations. And we can actually see that breeders and rescuers, they actually have very similar mentalities. Right? The good breeders, we're not talking about backyard breeders. Pretty much, they want to have dogs, find good homes, and stay in these homes. Right? And so far in the last 12 years, I've realized the biggest thing keeping us from that is education and accessible education. And most importantly, education that makes sense, and education that's complete. Okay? So those of you guys who are joining us today for a little bit of help, I do want to just give you a little bit of what we're going to be going over today. This is a 4-week seminar. So why is it 4 weeks? We're going to break them down into the big 4 things that we see how we accidentally fail, okay? Or the biggest parts of that aren't being talked about. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is management. Next week, we're going to talk about actually development of obedience and listening. The third week, we're going to be talking about socialization. And the fourth week, we're going to be talking about leadership skills, relationship building. And funny enough, all 3 of these, the first 3, actually help you develop leadership skills. So we're going to go over those in detail. This is going to be kind of a little bit of a loose form. I do have things I want to talk about. However, I have Rachel, who's actually one of our board members. She's actually on the computer right now. So if you guys have any particular questions, go ahead and type them up. We will be doing about 30 to 40 minutes of a Q&A at the very end of this. So those of you guys who are sticking around, please do so. Those of you guys who might think, want to share this, you guys totally can. This will be available on YouTube Live, actually on our YouTube channel. You can actually send it to your friends. So, and for any reason, if you can't stay for this whole thing, you can watch the rest of it later. We just want to have this content out there to help as many people as possibly can. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive right in to management. Okay, what is dog management? Okay, ultimately, what dog management is, it is all the things we are doing when we are not training our dogs. Right. So what are our dogs allowed to do? How are we exercising our dogs? What kind of habits are we allowing our dogs to develop throughout the day? Right? And I think some of the big points we have to make in management systems is we see common errors in the same place, okay, that eventually lead to potentially a homeless dog. Okay, the first thing that we see a dog who is destructive. We see dogs who are chewing or biting, or destroying furniture, or destroying shoes, or just doing a number of different things. And usually if I'm dealing with a puppy or a young rescue dog, people will tend to get very frustrated with this kind of stuff. And so the first thing I want to talk about, we're going to talk about den training. We're going to talk about the importance. We're going to talk about why it exists. So let's just jump straight into it. Okay. So den training is all dog trainers believe in den training. Okay? Now, what den training ultimately is, from a practical point of dog ownership, I remember when I was a kid, all of my dogs were allowed to go into the laundry room. Okay? Mostly they were outside dogs, but my dogs had a den. Okay? This is where they ate, this is where they slept, this is where they hung out and got to be away from the elements. This is where we were able to make sure our dogs were secure and safe. Okay? So in situations where I had people in my yard, or I had people doing construction in my house, we had a place that we could put the dogs away. Now, during COVID, at this present moment, all of us are stuck at home. Right? And a lot of us are spending so much time at home that our dogs are very used to our presence. Right? And unfortunately, what I've seen over the last 6 months, I've had so many calls about dogs who are overly attached to their owner, dogs who are overprotective of their owner. Also, dogs who lack confidence because their owners are always with them and never actually have to explore or socialize outside of the four walls. And so this ultimately becomes super detrimental for a lot of things that dogs can do. A lot of their confidence, their decisions, how stressed they are when they're outside. And so, unfortunately, too much access to an owner or to the family has potential, not always, but has potential to lead to the development of bad habits. Most importantly, habits that make you dislike your dog. I'm currently reading a chapter in a book. The chapter is titled "Don't Let Your Children Do Things That Would Make You Dislike Them." Right? And ultimately, I see that there's on accident there's a lot of this happening with our dogs. Okay, I'm going to pull out some of my notes that I was taken. All right. So in den training, other different forms of den training would be like very common one is crate training. Right? That's a form of den training. Some people are a little iffy about crate training. Perhaps maybe you didn't do it when you were a kid, so it might be foreign to you. Perhaps your dog hates it. Maybe I hear the story all the time. We tried to crate train my dog. Our dog hated it, and then we just kind of scrapped the whole idea altogether. But then there's a lot of other issues that came from not being able to. Let's see. A lot of people also they just don't know how to crate train. Right? So I know when I was a kid, crates were not a thing. However, dens or laundry room or baby in the kitchen or a puppy pen, these things are also other forms of dens. Okay? So for a practical reason, why is den training important? Well, when we get new dogs, whether they're puppies or whether they are actually rescues, okay? Let's say a year and a half old, that's the average age for a rescue. We cannot let the dog just have complete freedom. And the reason for it is because your dog doesn't know how to live inside your own house. Okay? So unless you're the type of person that can be with your dog 24 hours a day, on a leash, attached to them, there's going to be times that we have to separate ourselves. So we have to take a shower, go to the bathroom, cook, maybe go get groceries, maybe do a number of different things. And unfortunately, what happens is your dog always has access to you. Unfortunately, we run the risk of developing a relationship and developing lots of attachment. Okay? Also, what happens is if your dog has so much freedom, maybe their puppy tendencies, and sometimes with rescue dogs, they have what we call unresolved puppy issues. So pretty much you can have a dog who's a teenager who has the similar behaviors of mouthiness, grumpiness, overexcitement, lack of boundary and personal space that a formidable puppy could have, right? But this time the dog is 5 times bigger than the right? So we can have rescue puppy issues. And so what happens is we see that whether it's the dog's behavior, whether it's the dog's impulses, or whether it's the dog's just emotional attachment to us. If we don't have separation occasionally throughout the day, we run the risk of doing the wrong states of mind developing. Okay? So when practicing den training, we are going to go over kind of a step-by-step way of making sure that we can make den training or crate training really easy for you guys. Again, it doesn't have to be a crate; it could be a number of other things. But we will definitely do a lot more in detail here. Okay. So, are there any of you guys on the live chat that you guys are failing at this moment getting our dogs to be separated? Go ahead and leave a couple comments. I want to talk to some of you guys.
I got nothing.
You guys have any failing with crate training? Any issues? Crate training, keeping your dog separated from you? Does your dog have separation anxiety? Does your dog follow you all over the place? If you leave the house, does your dog want to go up and back? Drop your questions if you guys have.
Our puppy cries when we leave him alone outside.
Leaving him outside. how often is your dog outside?
Mm.
Does your dog spend a lot of time outside?
About an hour.
About an hour at a time. And what's the number one reason why your puppy is outside for that hour? Just to run around, or to goof off? Or is he doing stuff in the house that makes you
We want him to be an outside dog, but he is little, so we try and keep him inside for now.
okay? And what reason do you have to have him be an outside dog? Is there a conflict in the family of the dog being inside versus outside? I think this is a very common question we've got here, right? Again, I have 5 dogs that grow up outside in their life. However, there are a couple.
He's a German Shepherd.
Okay, yeah, understood. So I don't know your exact situation because
so he's going to be a very large dog.
Right, yeah, it's going to be a very large dog. I don't know your situation 100%. However, I do, I can relate to it because I did grow up with a German Shepherd and a Chow Chow and Taliban and Shiba and all these dogs. And so we had very, very big dogs, but
this is very large space.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect. So there's a couple of things I want you guys to understand. This is for everybody who has their dog outside. Dogs who grow up outside become more animalistic. Dogs who grow up inside become more well-mannered and human. If that makes sense. Okay. And there's a big reason why. So one thing you have to look at is you have to look at what kind of dog do I want down the line. Okay. Now, if you have successfully been able to have a dog who is an outside dog, who is friendly with everybody, who doesn't have any bad behavior. It really depends what your expectation for a dog is. But generally speaking, dogs who grow up inside, as indoor dogs, who spend time outside occasionally, they develop better manners and self-control. They develop better socialization because they're with the people inside the house, the guests, the family members, the visitors, all those things. However, most people who get German Shepherds, perhaps you might want that dog to be a protection dog to protect the house, right? And so, always my question to you would be: is what if your dog is in your backyard? How is he entertaining himself? Right? Does he run around? Is he digging holes? Is he chewing on stuff? Because my dogs in the backyard, yeah, they did run around and play with each other occasionally. For the most part, my dogs are sleeping. About 16 to 18 hours a day, we might see dogs actually sleep. Okay? As a trainer, I always do recommend to, if you do want to have a dog to spend a majority of outside, at least when they're puppies, keep the dog inside with you early on so the dog can develop a strong bond and listen. Also, we want to make sure the dog is potty trained as well. There will be a time, yeah, it's raining outside, we don't want the dog to be disgusting, so we want to bring him back inside the house. We want to make sure he's not ripping clean. We want to make sure that he's not destroying anything in the house as well, because all of this is part of the domestication process of the dog, right? Always what we see, in dog training, dogs who live outside, it's a very old school way of having dogs. Even though my dog spends time in the yard, he lives inside. But dogs who live outside, it's a little bit old school in the sense of they're not going to listen to you. They may potentially be doing some bad things that you can actually curb right now in your puppy. So I can understand as an adult if you want the dog to be outside, but at this present moment, I do recommend training your dog to be inside first, because there sometimes may be this big gap because the dog is so they have a lot of access to you when he's inside, and when he's outside, he feels anxiety. Okay? I would start developing separation closer quarters, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, to start that. Okay, but ultimately, my huge recommendation is really try and make it inside the house if possible. If you have any questions on that, go ahead and drop them in. Again, I don't know your situation 100%, so I can't really make any judgment calls, but if you do want to know more, please ask me.
Not yet. Oh, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, cool. All right, so management. So when we crate dogs, okay, or when we're separating dogs from us, a lot of times people can kind of catastrophize separating. Right? So let's say I were to look at like a crate, kind of like this one here. All right, let's be realistic. This crate looks like it has bars on it. It looks, you know, it looks like it's like a cage. And I think we pretty much just simply just because that's the easiest material to make that crate. A couple of reasons people don't do it is because either they're not used to it or they don't understand why the dog should be isolated. Either the dog hates it and they just don't know how to do it. So in crate training, dogs, we really want to capitalize on the fact that dogs sleep. Okay, so dogs will sleep 16 to 18 hours a day. These are puppies, these are adult dogs. Adolescent dogs, they have a tendency of kind of generating more energy in the adolescent. Right? So you might run that dog for a mile and they lay down for a minute and they wake up. So in the dog training world, we have two forms of two pillars of mental and physical stimulation. So the first one is what we call physical and mental stimulation, which is mostly exercise. That's letting the dog run around, goof off, letting the dog play with the ball. That's physical stimulation. But the other half of what we have to work on is something called grounding. So grounding work is anything that makes our dogs calm, patient, relaxed, still, right? So if you think of children, right? They can't sit still all the time, right? And so when our parents sit us at the dinner table, that's grounding. And they teach us at school to sit down and focus on our work, that's grounding. And the crate training is one of probably the crate training or after den training allows our dogs to stay in a isolated place so that they can calm down and relax. Okay? A lot of dogs freak out for a bunch of reasons. Okay? You guys have to remember, especially right now during COVID, if we separate our dogs from us, they freak out for a couple things. You are the coolest thing that they play with, right? You are as a team. Okay? So unfortunately, what happens is when you take the fun thing away, the kid is naturally going to react. Right? If I take a toy away from the kid, after it's his bedtime, he's going to freak out. If I take candy away from the kid who thought he could have it, he's going to freak out. So naturally, there's going to be this fear of missing out that exists anytime we have close relationships. Okay. Now, when there's too much, when we become the dog's only source of entertainment, this is usually what a codependency kicks in. Right? So in confinement, this is actually what we teach our dogs to have other hobbies and habits that help us kind of fill in certain hours throughout the day because we can't always do it. Right? So in crate training or den training, there's a little bit of a pattern I want you guys to follow. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure we exercise. So here's an interesting thing with exercise. Exercise only has to be with a dog 20 to 30 minutes of active engagement. Okay. Now, where does the statistic come from? Your average dog trainers, we train dogs all the time. Okay. We are constantly with dogs. No dog trainer trains their dogs longer than 30 to 40 minutes. Why? Because after 30 to 40 minutes, we start seeing that dogs kind of get a little goofy or checked out, or they start getting super distracted, or they start getting kind of loopy in many ways, and that's usually indicative of a tired brain. Right? So after 30 to 40 minutes of exercise or play, then naturally our dogs are going to start coming down in energy. And so the next thing that we have to do is we're going to go ahead and teach our dog to chew on something. Now, where do we teach them to chew on stuff in isolation? Okay. Now, here's the funny thing. If your dog's not used to being separated from you, which I think is the biggest missing piece of all of this, we're going to go over how to troubleshoot that right after I talk about it. But the bones themselves and chewing is a grounding experience. So dogs evolved from wolves. Right? So dogs have spent centuries chewing on bones and sucking out marrow and cleaning out vessels of food. And so it kind of puts them in a very meditative state. So if we're not asking about to chew on things on a regular basis, that would be something I want you guys to attempt. Okay? Get something delicious. Do we have a bone in there?
We're having an audio complaint around here.
What's going on?
I don't know.
Let's see. Hello, 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 hello. What audio could you guys use? Hello, 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 hello. Sorry about the technical issues, guys. When you talking to the camera. Oh, so the camera is the audio. Okay. It still sucks though, huh? Okay, go ahead and turn it on. Is this better audio?
Okay, the hello sounds good. When you sit down, you can't hear.
Right now, you can't hear anything. I mean, it doesn't feel good. Sound good.
We can hear you, it's just muffled.
I'm sorry for the issues, guys. Let's see. If I talk towards you guys this way, is the audio better? The shitty part about YouTube Live, guys, is that I can't disconnect to fix the audio without ruining the whole live stream. So I do apologize. How about now? Okay. Is this better at all? Right here. Okay. Let's do this. All right. A bit better. Okay. Well, a bit better is that hopefully we can maybe turn the volume up and hopefully we can make it work for right now. Sorry for the audio issues, guys. Okay. Okay. So we have bones, something like this. This is a beef bone. And in these beef bones, they're hollowed out in the middle. Okay. Now what we can do is we can take some of the dog's food. We can take some kibble. We can make a mash out of it. We can take some wet canned food. We can take some actual treats, a hot dog, for example. We can stick it inside this bone and jam it inside. So this whole hollowed out bone can be filled up with some tasty goodies. Okay. Now, it's when we fill up this bone, this is ultimately supposed to be the dog's distraction, okay, during confinement. However, there is something tricky that happens when the dog is under stress. They lose their appetite. Right? So if we can try and give our dogs toys or bones or food when we isolate them from us, if our dogs are not used to being isolated, then unfortunately what happens is all our attempts to give the dog bones and food kind of just go to waste, right? The dog just doesn't want to interact with us. Okay? And so what we have to do before we can make the crate positive, right? We have to make the crate normal, okay? Or we have to make the isolation normal. All right. It's isolation and den training is something very similar to like what I had to experience when I was a kid. Okay. I'm the youngest of 4 siblings, and I'm 5 years younger than my brother and brother. Okay. So what this means was I had to go to bed early before everybody else. Okay. Now, when I was a kid, obviously, what was the most frustrating thing when going to bed early? When all the rest of my siblings can stay up late.
It's actually me being pissed off that I couldn't do what everyone else was doing. I couldn't enjoy the same movies that they were. In essence, it's FOMO, it's fear of missing out, right? And so, in order for us to really wrap our heads around brain training, we're going to have to deal with a little bit of troubleshooting, and then we're going to open this up to some Q&As for you guys after. But the troubleshooting that we're going to be going over is if you put your dog in the crate and you let them whine, okay, does your dog get louder and more whiny, or does your dog calm down? Right? If your dog calms down, that's great. Keep doing that. Okay? Eventually, your dog will give up and calm down. Okay. Now, a majority of people who are having issues with confinement work, I almost guarantee they keep whining. They start barking. Sometimes they start clawing at the gate or at the crate, and this ends up becoming very concerning. Right? We're super worried about it. So. We're going to talk a little bit about something that you don't see on YouTube. We're going to talk about something that you don't really see on the internet, because it's a very traditional technique that helps us get our dogs calm, get our dogs to relax. But there's a couple things we want to do before we move on to this next technique. Okay, we want to make sure our dogs are exercised. Number one. Okay, we want to make sure that our dogs have things that they are drawn to, like a bone or food. Okay. We want to also make sure that we can separate our dogs just a short distance away from us. Okay. So, for example, if this was my living room, which it is, but let's say we had a crate off in the corner, just like this. So there's my TV, there's my crate. And let's say I just had a crate just off to the side where I could have my dog. Okay. All confinement worker crate training needs to start at a close enough distance because our dogs need us to really guide them through this potentially stressful experience. Okay. So we know that if our dogs have pooped, peed, exercised, and eaten, if we put our dogs away, what we end up seeing that they have potential to still freak out. They have potential to still whine, bark, and cry. Okay. Now, a couple things we want to talk about is, so that we're all on the same page, is understanding how a tantrum works and understanding what we're trying to troubleshoot here is a tantrum that our dogs are throwing. Okay, some dogs are more persistent than others, and some dogs are very incredible hopers. The more that they whine, the stronger they get, right? And so part of what we want to do is we really want to make sure that we are assessing what our dogs are able to do, but the troubleshoot is going to go something like this. Okay, so when our dogs are really close to us, okay, let's say we're here. All right, you can start this right next to the dog. Okay, now if I put my dog in a crate, can you grab a dog for me? Okay. If I put my dog in a crate, right, and I'm right next to them, okay, a lot of times, again, we have to normalize this. But whether I'm here on the floor or on my couch, I'm in a close proximity. So the dog shouldn't feel abandoned. The dog shouldn't be freaking out. The dog shouldn't be overreacting. However, dogs can overreact. So we're going to bring in our little friend here. This is Penny. Hi, Penny. There you go. Hey, come on. Good. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the leash on just for the time being. And so let's say our dog is here. Let's say the dog is freaking out for some reason. Okay. What we want to look at is we want to look at the escalation. Right? Does my dog calm down over time, or does my dog persist over time? Okay. If we start seeing that our dog starts getting stronger and stronger and stronger, what our job is as dog owners is to cap the escalation of the tension. Okay, so what does capping and escalation of the tension mean? So if I'm the guy and I'm going, that's an escalation, right? So we start seeing this escalation of noise, of stress, and the dog is freaking out. Now again, check the boxes. Dog freaking food. The dog just exercised. The dog just ate or has eaten recently, right? So we can check all those boxes out. The only reason our dog is whining and barking is frustration of missing out, fear of missing out, right? So part of what we want to do is we want to tell the dog what is, this dog is too big. Oh, this is Billy, sorry, not Penny. Billy is too big. So I need a dog that's a little worse. Sorry. Sorry. She's chilling. She's great thing. Sorry, guys. Let's do a dog who's not really great thing. I have a dog here that we can. So hopefully we can get some like a real live helpful thing for you guys. Really fun. I'll get into it. So to go back to the theory, right? The idea is if the dog is escalating, getting whiny, getting barky, getting crying, our job is to actually control it. Okay? A lot of times we're constantly trying to make things positive. We're trying to throw bones in, we're trying to throw treats in, we're trying to, we're trying to, in essence, we're kind of trying to beat around the bush to hopefully that the dog will all of a sudden like or love the crate. The reality of it is the dog will not love the crate until the crate becomes normal, right? Again, to go back to the analogy of the kid going to bed early, right? We want the kid to go to bed. Now, if the kid's not used to going to bed early, what's going to happen? He's going to get fussy, he's going to complain. But if me as a kid, if I'm getting sent to bed and I throw a tantrum, well, there's two ways of handling it. We either get into the tantrum and say, okay, kid, you can stay up for 30 more minutes. Or we say, no, kid, cut it out, you're going to bed. Okay? So we either cooperate or we oppose. Right? And so when we can check off all these boxes, the dog's eating, the dog's poop, the dog's exercise, the dog has a tasty bone and all that stuff, the only thing really preventing the dog from relaxing is his own frustration or her own frustration. Perfect. So this is Annabelle. Hi, Annabelle. Annabelle's new here, so let's see how she does. Okay. Yeah. All right, let's see how she does. You can do anything. He's going to show you. Okay. Aha, see, she hates it. That's good. Here's some treats. This, I think, will be a better lesson for you guys. Yeah. All right. Cool. So now a couple things. If you guys notice, I have a leash on the dog at this present moment. So those of you guys whose dogs are, kind of like Annabelle, right? Might be freaking out a little bit. Having a leash on the dog will actually make it easier for you guys to do this following steps. Okay? If my dog is barking, whining, crying, or the tantrum is escalating, our job is to cap the tantrum. Okay? So I want you to look at your dog's reactions on a scale of 1 to 10. If a 10 is barking your freaking head off, okay, we want to stop it at like a level 6 or 7. Okay? If our dogs go physical tantrum, they are clawing against the crate or bouncing back and forth, you know she's on YouTube, guys. This dog knows she's on YouTube. In the event that your dog is freaking out physically, okay, we can go ahead and interrupt the physical tantrum. Okay, so anything that is extreme volume or extreme physical behavior. Okay, let's go ahead and simulate a little bit. Go ahead and come over here, Christiana, and just tease her a little bit. Okay, just hang out right there. That's good. She's doing super good. Love that. All right, let's just go over simulation. Okay, I'm going to use Annabelle still as the decoy dog, but the key here is we're going to have a leash on the dog. Okay? And the leash is going to be a tool that we use to control the dog's tantrum. Okay. Now, if our dogs are freaking out, and again, use your best judgment here. My dog is exercising, my dog is fed, my dog has done all these things. What we're going to do is we're going to grab the leash and we're going to relax it, and we're going to give a little tug on the leash. Okay. Those of you guys who may be familiar with certain behavior training in humans, or maybe you guys have seen this in old time movies. In movies, when someone was freaking out, right, they're getting very anxious, they're throwing a tantrum. Someone might go, "Get a hold of yourself," and they slap them across the face, right? This is a very comedic example of something called sensory grounding. Okay, now sensory grounding is actually something that a lot of my generation actually uses a lot when it comes to anxiety attacks and panic attacks. So I'm not sure if you guys have ever seen someone who suffers from social anxiety or panic attack, but they actually sometimes wear a rubber band on their wrist, and this is given to them by their doctors and by their psychologists and psychiatrists. When they suffer a panic attack, they're actually instructed to snap the rubber band. Okay? Now, the snapping of that rubber band anchors them to one of their senses. Okay? So sensory grounding is ultimately anytime an animal anchors to one of their five senses. Right? So it's sight, smell, taste, hearing, and touch. Okay? So these five. Okay? Now, right now, Annabelle is anchoring to her bone, which is okay. Yeah, so what we're attempting to do in crate training is actually anchor our dogs to something. So if the bone's not cutting, it's usually because the dog is being very emotional. So the next thing we want to do is we want to anchor our dog to the feeling of touch. Okay, so if our dogs are anchored to a sensation that they feel, all of a sudden the tantrum actually calms down. Okay, very similar to people when they snap their rubber band on their wrist. Okay, other forms of sensory grounding that we experience as humans is like, why do people watch movies? Because we're able to be captivated with our vision by some type of colorful sensory or something like that. Why do people listen to music? Because there's something about music that calms us down. Okay, so the big two senses that we're actually trying to teach our dogs to be comfortable with is we're actually trying to teach them to be comfortable with sensory grounding on food and sensory grounding on feel. Okay, so let's say I wanted little Annabelle to calm down a little bit. Annabelle. A couple ways we can do sensory grounding is with our leash. We can give a little tap or a little correction on the leash. Or we can actually use a little bit of a surprise. For example, we can go, hey, didn't phase her, right? Hey, that phased her, right? And I'm not hitting the crate super hard. The goal is I just want to surprise the dog from what she was assessing, right? So this didn't work, or it did work, right? But if I go like that, it's a little bit more surprising and startling, okay? Now, I don't want this to ever be misconstrued of any time my dog makes a noise that our job is to try and control or punish the dog. I don't want this to be misconstrued that way. What our agenda is to stop the escalation of tension. So, again, if your dog is scale of 1 to 10, 10 is the dog is going nuts. Your job is to control the dog at 6 or a 7. If you see that the dog is escalating to that point. Trying to control a level 10 is very, very difficult. So my goal for you guys, if your dog is whining, barking, and crying in the crate, I would suggest put a leash on the dog. You can use the leash to grab the dog's attention, like that. Okay. You can also use the side of the crate to grab the dog's attention if you need to. Some people, also some older school methods, we would be using squirt bottles, or we would be using shaker cans. Anything that can snap the dog out of it and bring them back to one of their senses. Okay? But tantrums and FOMO are the biggest reason why people fail any type of den. All right? Good. All right. Now, okay, perfect. Got it. All right, so that's our den training work. Okay, I do want to open this up to some questions for you guys. Those of you guys who have attended crate training, separation, isolation training, or anything like that, go ahead and shoot me some questions because again, this seminar and workshop is for you guys. I want to help you guys solve some of the problems that you have experienced. And Juan Garcia, thanks so much for participating. Appreciate it. Any questions in crate training, den training? No, nothing? Okay, cool. So next thing we're going to go over. There you go. Bye, Annabelle. We'll see you later, Mama. Oh, wait. Right now he sleeps very well next to our bed. Should we start to put his crate a little further away? He sleeps in his crate next to it. Okay, perfect. All right. So good question. So if the dog sleeps well next to your bed, that's awesome. What we want to start doing is we actually want to start normalizing the dog being separated from you actually throughout the day. So if the dog's sleeping well by your bed, a lot of dogs will sleep wonderfully when isolated and confined next to their owners, especially at nighttime when lights are out. Right? So what we want to do is we actually want to teach our dog to be separated from us while we're awake, while they're awake also. So after exercise, after a nice long walk, what I want us to try is maybe try isolating the dog and crate. Maybe bring the crate to your living room, to your office, wherever you spend most of the time, and ask your dog to go to the crate more frequently throughout the day. Okay? If we make confinement or separation normal, then it becomes something that the dog learns to expect or look forward to throughout the day. If it becomes something that's too novel, the dog unfortunately ends up freaking out. The dog ends up freaking out. The dog ends up thinking that it's a punishment. Okay, so the only way that we can make separation a positive thing is we have to normalize it. Okay, so for you, I would start, yes, maybe a bigger, maybe have a bigger distance between you and the dog in the crate, and then gradually distance it where the dog is out of sight. So the stage by stage would be close quarters. Imagine I'm sitting on this couch and there's the crate right there. And then eventually put the crate on the opposite side of the room, and eventually put the crate out of sight in a different room. You just gradually build up that. Okay. Cool. Any other questions regarding crate training, guys? Or confinement work? Awesome. Wonderful. Okay. So next couple things that we want to look at. If you guys are dealing with a puppy or a very energetic rescue, a lot to go back to those two pillars we talked about. We talked about separation, or sorry, we talked about stimulation, right, as a form of burning dogs' energy. And I think one of the big misconceptions that we have as dog owners is that we feel that dogs have this battery of energy. And if we don't expel that battery of energy, unfortunately, what might happen is you might actually see that energy rolls over into the next hour or rolls over later into the day, causing potential bad behavior, right? But just like you and I, we kind of have these natural, dogs have these natural ebb and flows of energy that they go through. And so part of what we want to do is we want to understand how we can affect those flows of energy, okay? So exercising, two things you want to exercise. Exercising the body is one thing, okay? But I want you guys to understand when we stimulate dogs. So stimulation is anything that the dog naturally likes to do compulsively, right? There's this mechanism in the brain that anytime you do something that you want, it reinforces that behavior, right? So kind of like why we get addicted to social media, it's because we want to do it. Let's say someone tags us or likes us, well, it reinforces it, and then it makes us want to do social media more and more, right? So with dogs, what's interesting is anytime that they pull, anytime that they sniff things, anytime that they bark or play with other dogs, anytime they see a squirrel, because dogs were kind of hunters and scavengers growing up, what tends to happen is they actually tend to they naturally get reinforced by these things. And so what we really want to do is we want to understand that letting our dogs do those things, even though let's say we go for a walk for an hour, we let our dogs sniff and pull and play around with other dogs and all those things. Yes, it will help burn some physical energy. However, there are going to be certain components in the way that we are exercise that actually cause more energy. Right? And so part of what we want to look at is also the other half we talked about. There's the stimulation work and then there's the grounding work. Okay? So grounding, again, when the dog comes back, we teach the dog to rest, either in isolation or we teach the dog to rest in a puppy pen. Right? If the dog is not mentally stimulated, we have to make sure that we ground the dog's mind onto a sensory, right? We want sensory grounding. Okay. So a lot of times we're constantly trying to give the dog stuff to do all the time. And instead of doing that, I want us to give the dog stuff to do, and I want us to go ahead and tell him to do something that relaxes him. Right? When we create this yin and yang of dog raising, we start seeing that these dogs start developing more desire to chill. we actually start seeing that they're more rested more regularly, which means better behavior and cognition. Okay? And so those are things that we really recommend in regards to walks. Now, one of the main ways people try and exercise their dogs is through walking. Okay, I hate to break it to you guys, walking is not that cardiovascular. It's not for dogs. These dogs can run for miles and play for hours. And if we think that, our 30, 40-minute walk is a good form of exercise, we may need to kind of adjust it just a little bit. Now, good forms of exercise for dogs is going to be playing with them. Right? We want to be playing, fetch, tug of war, ball, all those things. And that's going to be easier for us to burn some of the dog's energy. Okay? Do any of you guys have any issues exercising your dogs or with their energy? Please go ahead and leave some comments in the live chat. Okay. Oh, also, those of you guys who are watching, we actually this is a free seminar workshop for everybody who wants to be involved. But if you guys, for any reason, if you guys feel inclined to donate to our nonprofit, please go ahead and do so. If you guys go down in the description down below, go to our website, canisfoundation.org, and go ahead and donate whatever you can, $1, $2, $3. Ultimately, what we're using, the funding is for us to be able to create content and also create things that are going to help dogs. Right? We host workshops, we host classes at animal shelters and rescue organizations, and we can't do it by ourselves. Right now, me and my partners are funding all of this by ourselves. But in order to be able to help more people, to make dog training more accessible to you guys, and also to help it make more sense to you, when you need that support and that help. So any little bit would really help. Okay. Okay. So if you guys don't have any questions about exercise, then let's just go ahead and just open the rest of this episode up to Q&As. Okay. If there's anything that you want to know or understand about dogs in general, about your dog in general, anything more specific things that you want to get into, please go ahead and shoot them. We're going to spend the next 10, 15 minutes on just Q&As before we wrap this up. So yeah, please go ahead and shoot any questions that you guys might have. I'm here for it.
How do you teach the puppies to get into it?
That's a good question. How do you teach the puppy to get into it? Can you grab little baby, little no, not Milo. Get Mochi. Oh, I see. So not Mochi. Yeah. Maybe, yeah. So good question. We'll go ahead and demonstrate that for you. Okay. Right now, what is your puppy doing? Is he kind of putting the brakes on and not letting you go in? Normal. He bolts out. Okay. Yeah, so let's go ahead and practice what we're going to do here. This is baby Milo. Okay. Milo. Yes, we don't. Okay, perfect. Okay, cool. Hi, baby. Okay, so this is little Milo. Couple ways you can get dogs to go in crates. So, I mean, when a dog's this small, it's just as simple as if you put them in, right? That's pretty obvious. Now, if you have a really big, strong dog, sometimes using some motivators will be a lot easier. So if I have some food, okay, you hold this food open. So right now the dog knows I have some treats. So something as simple as just throwing some treats in and playing a game. Okay, yeah. When the dog goes in there, you can just keep tossing some more treats if they want to stay in there. So that's one way we can do it. Get the dog to come out. Come on. And you can just play a game. If you do this 4 or 5 times in a row, back to back, before you know it, anytime that you open the door of the crate, you can pretend that you're tossing a piece of cookie in and the dog will hop right in. Now, from what I was gathering from your question, is if the door is open, the dog will come straight out. Correct? So part of what we want to do is we can actually use the door as a tool. And come on this side. We can actually use the door as a tool to block dog from coming out. So, so just by calmly just closing it on the dog, right? Now, if the dog's coming out a little bit more rapidly, you might have to be a little quicker with it. But ultimately what we want is we can just kind of develop this little habit where we warn the dog to back off, and we just use the door as a very simple block. Right? We just block the dog from coming out. Okay. Now, if the dog sits or lays down or relaxes inside that crate, you can totally throw them a couple cookies and treat them for going in there. And this can just be a game. Now, a lot of dogs that come in for training, what we start seeing is the first day and a half, our dogs, a lot of the dogs don't want to go in the crate, right? For the first day and a half. However, because we're constantly playing with the dogs, we're training the dogs, we're taking them in and out, I would say a dog comes in and out of his crate about 10 times a day, right? And so with that level of frequency coming in, coming out, we have a lot of opportunity to really condition the dog to do the right thing, okay? And so when we condition the dog to do the right thing, eventually, again, it becomes normal. So anytime we open the door, the dog just kind of pops right in and is happy to do so, right? If it's not normal, or if it's always a struggle, sometimes what our goal is, we just want to teach the dog to just get in. So if that means lifting them and prompting them in and then saying, good dog, giving them a treat when they're in there, even if it wasn't in their own will, okay? Or if it was against their own will, it's okay. Little by little, we have to help kind of prompt the dog to do the behavior that we want them to do. Once you do it 4, 5, 6, 7 times, you're going to start seeing that your dog actually just goes in easier every single time. All right? So I hope that question was helpful, or that answer was helpful. Yep. That's funny. That's funny. So what is the other dog? So this is for Jacqueline. What is the other dog doing that makes him not come? I guess he hear you, or is he like constantly sniffing or scavenging or doing the same thing? Right, right. Okay, so he hears he's just stubborn. So I hear this a lot as a dog trainer, okay? A couple things, a little checklist I want us to kind of go over. How often do you ask your dog to come when he's not doing something, right? 90% of the time, a very high percentage of the time, a lot of people are only asking their dogs to come when they're doing something interesting, okay? And so what ends up happening is because come is not normal, it's not a conversation that we have a lot with the dog unless they're doing something wrong or distracting or reactive or whatever it might be. We're kind of setting ourselves up to fail, right? It's like only asking your husband to do something when he's watching football, right? Like you're going to fail 100% of the time, right? Okay, and he's not food motivated, so that's a tricky part too. So if there's no motivation, sometimes we have to do a couple tricks, okay? Perhaps a squeaker, perhaps a toy, perhaps something else that motivates him. Hopefully, maybe our affection or our excitement motivates him, right? Food motivation it can be easy to develop. There are a small percentage of dogs that are just like, about food, right? One of the tricks in dog training is that we only feed our dogs by hand. So that way our dogs learn the only way to get food is from the human, right? So that kind of can help build a little bit more food drive for your dog. But if he's a terrier mix, maybe a squeaker, maybe maybe using a squeaker, maybe using a high-pitched, playful voice might help. Now, again, that's tools that we would use to motivate. The actual process of teaching our dogs to come to us successfully has to start at short distance, right? So like from one side of the couch to the other side of the couch, and somehow give the dog rewards and incentives to do so, okay? When we say that dogs are stubborn, we're implying that they know what we want, okay? In my experience, a lot of people don't truly teach the dog to like coming, right? So what we need to do is figure out a way, how do we teach the dog to like coming? So ideally, food would be easy, play would be easy, affection would be easy. That would be the ideal ways to start shaping the behavior, but ultimately, you just have to normalize come over and over and over until we find what makes the dog tick to get them to come to you more regularly. Cool. I hope that was helpful again. Without knowing what you've tried, or seeing what you're doing. Like it's hard for me to give you, tips to fix it. But generally, ask it more, make it easier, so shorter distances, and make it ask more when there's no distractions. That's going to be the very simple place to start for about that. Okay? And that's just the first step in about 5 different steps that we would prescribe as dog trainers. Okay, but at least try step 1 and then get back to me. Those of you guys who have any other questions or are curious about what we do at CANIS Behavior or at the CANIS Foundation, go ahead and email us, info@canisfoundation.org. And again, your donations would be very welcome if you guys can do that. If you guys actually go to the description, we actually are accepting donations via VENMO as well, and also PayPal. If you just type in info@canisfoundation.org, you can send it via PayPal as well. All right. I want to go ahead and take one more question if there's someone there. Yeah, no problem, Jack. You're very welcome. You know what? That's very sweet of you. I would actually give it to a dog who rescue who actually adopts a dog, who actually takes in dogs. So we are an educational nonprofit. We have rescued dogs in the past. We have trained them and gotten them homes. But at the present moment, I think we'd be better served at a nonprofit that takes dogs. If it's a large crate, maybe think Rottweiler rescue, Doberman rescue, Husky rescue, German Shepherd rescue, right? Yeah, talk to them. Oh, Trisha, what's up, Trisha? How are you? Sorry, I didn't see it. Okay. Any other questions you guys have? We're running around the hour mark. All right. I want to thank you guys so much for participating. Those of you guys who are very active on the live chat, thank you so much. I hope that this was helpful in some way, shape, or form. Please join us again for next week. We're going to be doing our obedience segment, where we go ahead and talk about how to teach commands, kind of the things that they're not telling you guys on the internet, so that you guys can be more aware of how maybe you can be doing things better to get your doctors to you. All right. Then don't forget to follow us on week 3, where we're going to be doing socialization techniques and skills. Also on week 4, where we're doing a lot of leadership skills. And if you guys found this useful, share it with your friends. They can actually watch this live stream over again if they need to. We will go ahead and chop up this live stream into a table of contents. So anything that we talk about, we're going to put timestamps down in the description, so that way you guys don't have to hear me talking about nonsense all the time. You guys can just go straight to the actual content itself. All right. Thank you so much, Juan, for that comment. Really appreciate it. And again, if you guys have any other questions, feel free to email us. Our nonprofit, again, is canisfoundation.org. Our business is the canisdogtraining.com. We do a lot of group classes out here in Los Angeles. However, on the foundational side, we want to help you guys and help raise money to be able to help rescues, shelters, and also host public workshops at either low cost or no cost for people in public. All right. Thank you guys so much. Again, my name is Brent. Those of you guys, I'm not sure if you guys know, I actually host a podcast called the Dog Trainers Podcast. You guys can follow us on Instagram. It's at Dog Trainers Podcast. Also follow our nonprofit. This description is it's in the description down below at canisfoundation.org or at Canis Foundation. Thank you guys again for participating, and we'll see you guys next week. Peace. Take care.